Route 66, the Mother Road. It whispers tales of freedom, adventure, and the American dream etched on the cracked asphalt stretching across a continent. But drive its forgotten stretches, deep in the desert night, and you might hear different whispers. Stories not of chrome and diners, but of isolation, fractured time, and mirages that hunger. Many have felt the pull, the strange static on the airwaves when the sun bleeds away. But few return to tell the tale, and those who do speak in fragmented rhymes. So, what really happened to Liam and Maya on that bypassed strip of highway when the clock struck 12? This is their story. Let's begin the story. Get comfortable and listen closely.
The cherry-red '68 Mustang convertible rumbled, a low, thrumming heartbeat against the vast, indifferent canvas of the Mojave Desert. Inside, Liam gripped the wheel, knuckles white less from tension and more from a decade spent gripping ergonomic keyboards. Mid-30s, a tech analyst with a penchant for order and predictable outcomes, he felt distinctly out of place on this pilgrimage into America's kitschy past. Route 66. He'd conceded, mostly because Maya had looked at him with those wide, hopeful eyes, the ones that still, occasionally, made him forget spreadsheets and server downtimes. Maya, beside him, was lost in the landscape. Her camera, a vintage Nikon that felt more substantial in her hands than any sleek digital model, was her third eye. An artist, she craved the intangible, the vibe, the ghost in the machine of Americana. She framed shots of skeletal gas station signs riddled with bullet holes, tumbleweeds caught in rusted fences, the endless ribbon of asphalt shimmering under the late afternoon sun. "Isn't it incredible, Liam?" she murmured, lowering the camera. "The feeling of it, like stepping back in time." Liam grunted, glancing at his phone screen. No bars, again. "It's vast," he offered, trying for diplomacy, though I suspect the feeling is mostly dehydration and impending boredom. He'd packed spreadsheets onto a thumb drive, just in case inspiration failed to strike him. Their dynamic hummed with a low-grade static of its own, an undercurrent beneath the curated nostalgia of the trip. It was supposed to be a reconnection, a deliberate detour from the pressures of city life and diverging career paths. Maya sought inspiration for her stalled gallery show. Liam sought, well, mostly he sought reliable Wi-Fi and an end to the endless loop of 50s rockabilly on the satellite radio they'd lost signal for an hour ago. They'd passed through Kingman earlier, a town clinging stubbornly to its Route 66 identity with murals and souvenir shops. It felt authentic enough, quirky. Liam had even enjoyed a decent burger. But the gas station attendant, a man whose face seemed carved from desert rock and nicotine stains, had given them a peculiar look when Maya mentioned their plan to drive a particularly remote, bypassed section further west. "Folks mostly stick to the interstate bypass now," he'd rasped, wiping grease from his hands onto an already filthy rag. "That old stretch gets lonely, especially after dark. Heard stories. Dead zones, they call them. Not just for cell phones." He chuckled, a dry rattling sound. "Best be clear of it 'fore midnight." Liam had dismissed it as local color, the kind of folksy spook story designed to sell Route 66 snow globes. Maya, however, had shivered slightly, despite the Arizona heat. "Adds to the atmosphere, right?" she'd said later, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Now, the atmosphere was thickening. The sun, a molten orb, was sinking rapidly towards the jagged silhouette of distant mesas, painting the sky in strokes of violent orange, bruised purple, and angry red. The heat was finally beginning to leach from the air, replaced by a creeping coolness that felt premature. The Mustang's headlights sliced through the gathering gloom, illuminating cracked pavement and the skeletal remains of roadside businesses long surrendered to dust and wind. The iconic signs they passed now seemed less like invitations and more like warnings, their faded paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Liam checked the gas gauge. Just under half a tank. Plenty to reach the next town marked on Maya's meticulously annotated vintage map. A place promising cheap motels and maybe, just maybe, a data signal. Then it happened. A cough, a sputter, a violent shudder that vibrated through the steering wheel and up Liam's arms. The engine choked, gasped, and died. The rhythmic thrumming ceased, replaced by an abrupt, suffocating silence. The Mustang coasted for a few agonizing yards before rolling to a dead stop on the shoulder, the cracked asphalt ticking under the cooling engine block. Silence. Absolute, profound silence. The kind that rings in your ears, amplifying the frantic beat of your own heart. No. No, 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 Liam muttered, turning the key. Nothing. Not even a click. He tried the headlights. Dead. The radio. Dead. Damn it! He slammed his palm against the steering wheel, the sound startlingly loud in the stillness. Maya stared straight ahead, her face pale in the rapidly fading light. What happened? She whispered. I don't know, Liam snapped, instantly regretting his tone. Fear clawed at his pragmatic veneer. Engine failure. Complete. Just stopped. He fumbled for his phone, holding it aloft. Still no signal, of course. He unbelted his seatbelt. Okay. Stay calm. I'll check the engine. Maybe it's something simple, a loose wire, battery terminal. He knew, even as he said it, that it felt like more than that. The car hadn't just broken down, it felt like it had given up. He popped the hood, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. He shined his phone's weak flashlight onto the engine block. It looked normal, oily, sure, but intact. No obvious signs of catastrophic failure. He jiggled wires, checked connections, cursed under his breath. Nothing. Maya got out, wrapping her arms around her as the desert chill began to bite. The vastness that seemed beautiful minutes ago now felt oppressive, menacing. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. Liam, she whispered, her voice tight. Look. She pointed back down the road, the way they'd come. Miles away, perched on a rise against the darkening horizon, a faint, intermittent light pulsed weakly, like a dying firefly. What is that? Liam squinted. Headlights? No, Maya said, her voice barely audible. It looked like a sign, a neon sign. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Liam peered into the gloom, seeing nothing but deepening twilight and the desolate stretch of road behind them. You're seeing things, May. Fatigue, stress. Maybe, she conceded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the spot, searching the horizon. The last sliver of sun vanished. Darkness slammed down like a lid. They were stranded, miles from anywhere, on a forgotten piece of road, with a dead car, no signal, and the unnerving words of an old gas station attendant echoing in the sudden, immense silence of the Mojave night. The Mother Road wasn't calling anymore. It was listening.
The darkness wasn't just the absence of light, it felt like a presence. Absolute black swallowed the landscape, the stars overhead emerging like scattered diamonds on infinite velvet, offering no warmth, only emphasizing the terrifying scale of their isolation. The desert night air turned bitingly cold, a stark contrast to the day's scorching heat, seeping into their clothes and chilling them to the bone. The silence pressed in, so profound it felt like a physical weight, broken only by the frantic thumping of their own hearts and the occasional unnerving skitter of something small and unseen moving in the parched scrub beyond the shoulder. Liam's phone flashlight, already low on battery, cast a pathetic, trembling beam that seemed barely to penetrate the gloom.
It illuminated the useless engine block, the cracked asphalt at their feet, Maya's pale, anxious face. But beyond its small circle lay an impenetrable void. Every shadow seemed too deep. Every rustle of wind through dry brush sounded like a whisper. Then the radio crackled. Not to life, exactly, more like a spasm. A burst of static erupted from the dashboard speakers, loud and harsh in the stillness, making them both jump. It lasted only a second, then silence returned. "What the hell?" Liam muttered, leaning back into the car, fiddling uselessly with the dead radio knobs. A few minutes later, it happened again, static, sharp, and angry. But this time, woven within it, faint and distorted, was a snippet of music. "Get your kicks," the iconic line from Bobby Troupe's anthem, warped and stretched, layered beneath the hiss and crackle before vanishing again. "Did you hear that?" Maya whispered, her eyes wide. Liam nodded slowly, a knot tightening in his stomach. "Yeah, Route 66. He tried the radio again. Still dead. Faulty wiring? Residual charge? His explanations sounded hollow even to himself. The anomalies escalated. Headlights appeared in the far distance, impossibly bright pinpricks miles down the straight stretch of road behind them. Hope surged. Another car! Rescue! But the lights behaved erratically. They seemed to hover, flicker, then abruptly vanish as if switched off long before any vehicle could have logically reached them or turned off. Then they'd reappear, miles away again, playing a cruel trick on their straining eyes. Maya clutched her camera, instinctively raising it, though she didn't take a picture. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Over there." She pointed towards the edge of the flashlight beam into the thick darkness beside the road. "I saw something move, just a shape, tall, flickering." Liam swept the beam in that direction. Nothing, just tangled creosote bushes in the looming dark. "It's an animal, May. A coyote. Or maybe just shadows playing tricks. We're tired, stressed." Yet even as he spoke, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. He hadn't seen anything, but he felt it, a sense of being observed, not by any animal, but by the night itself. Hours crawled by. The digital clock on Maya's camera, inexplicably still working when everything else electronic seemed dead or dying, ticked towards midnight with agonizing slowness. Their small supply of water was dwindling. The cold deepened, making their teeth chatter. Fear, sharp and primal, began to fray their nerves, leading to hushed, tense arguments fueled by desperation. "We can't just stay here," Maya insisted, pacing restlessly beside the dead Mustang. "We'll freeze or something." She didn't finish the thought. "I know I saw a light back there, Liam, before it got totally dark, a glow, over that rise." She pointed vaguely back down the highway. "A glow? Maya, there's nothing out here. Look!" Liam gestured wildly at the oppressive blackness surrounding them. "It's miles of empty desert. We saw the map. There are no towns marked for at least 50 miles in that direction. It was probably heat lightning or your eyes playing tricks." His pragmatism was a shield, but it was cracking under the weight of the inexplicable. The radio bursts, the phantom headlights. "The gas station guy," Maya reminded him, her voice low. "He said dead zones. He warned us about being out here after dark." "He was trying to sell us overpriced jerky," Liam retorted, though the attendant's words echoed unpleasantly in his mind. Staying put felt increasingly wrong. The silence wasn't empty. It felt charged, waiting. The skittering sound seemed closer now, accompanied by something else, a faint, rhythmic pulsing, almost like distorted music, seeming to emanate from the very air around them, sourceless and deeply unsettling. Buddy Huddy, maybe, drowned in static and distance. "Okay," Liam finally conceded, the admission tasting like defeat. "Okay, staying here isn't working. We're sitting ducks. If there's even a chance of something over that rise." He trailed off. It was a desperate gamble, fueled by dwindling hope and rising terror. "Okay, we lock the car, take the water, the flashlight, and we walk towards where you thought you saw the light." Maya nodded, relief warring with palpable fear on her face. "The Mother Road," she murmured, almost like a prayer. Maybe it provides." Liam didn't share her tentative faith, but the alternative, waiting passively in the crushing darkness for whatever unseen thing skittered just beyond the light, was unthinkable. They gathered their meager supplies, the remaining bottle of water sloshing mockingly. Liam checked the Mustang's doors were locked, a futile gesture against the vast indifference of the desert. Then together, they turned their backs on the dead car and started walking along the broken shoulder of Route 66, stepping deeper into the unnerving embrace of the Mojave night, chasing a memory of light, clinging to the fading myth of the road. The static seemed to follow, a whisper just beneath the threshold of hearing.
Walking on the crumbling shoulder was treacherous. Loose gravel shifted underfoot, and potholes yawned unexpectedly in the weak, bouncing beam of Liam's dying phone flashlight. The darkness felt absolute away from the faint reflective markers on the road itself. Every few minutes, Liam would sweep the light around, searching the oppressive blackness, half expecting to see eyes reflecting back, half terrified of what he might actually find. Maya walked close beside him, her camera clutched like a talisman, its strap digging into her shoulder. The strange sounds persisted, seeming to ebb and flow with the cold desert wind. That faint, distorted music, sometimes jazz, sometimes early rock and roll, always filtered through a thick layer of what sounded like radio static, would drift towards them, then fade, impossible to pinpoint its origin. The skittering noises kept pace, always seeming to be just at the periphery of their hearing, just beyond the flashlight's reach. The feeling of being watched intensified, evolving from a vague unease into a prickling certainty. It felt like the desert itself held its breath, observing their desperate pilgrimage. Maya kept stopping, raising her camera, not to her eye, but holding it out, snapping pictures into the void. The digital screen would flare briefly, illuminating their strained faces and the immediate desolation. "What are you doing?" Liam asked, his voice tight with exhaustion and fear. "Trying to catch something," Maya replied, her voice strained. "Sometimes, right when the flash goes off, I think I see flickers, orbs of light, things that aren't there a second later." She reviewed the photos on the small screen. Most were just blackness or showed the illuminated patch of road, but a few were corrupted, filled with lines of digital static, strange color bleeds, or unsettling blurry shapes that almost resolved into something recognizable before dissolving into noise. "See?" She showed Liam one particularly distorted image. "It's like the camera sees something we don't." Liam peered at the screen, his skepticism warring with the undeniable creepiness of the corrupted data. Digital interference, low-light sensor issues, static electricity out here maybe, but the excuses felt thin. They trudged onward, losing track of time, measuring progress only by the aching in their legs and the dwindling charge of the flashlight. They crested a small rise in the road, the effort leaving them breathless in the thin, cold air. Liam swept the beam forward, expecting more of the same endless empty blacktop. And then they saw it, not faintly, not intermittently, but blazing. As the digital clock on Maya's camera clicked over from 11:59 p.m. to 12 a.m., a neon sign erupted into existence over the crest of the next larger rise, perhaps a mile or two ahead. It cut through the profound darkness like a predatory jewel, impossibly bright, impossibly there. The Starlight Oasis, Vacancy and Cafe. The letters pulsed in vibrant pink and electric blue, the classic, sweeping script of a bygone era, an arrow outlined in buzzing yellow neon pointed downwards. Hope surged through Liam, raw and desperate, momentarily eclipsing the fear. "Civilization," he breathed, relief making him giddy. "A motel! Thank God!" But Maya gripped his arm, her fingers digging in. "Liam, wait! Wait for—" He started forward, energized by the prospect of light, warmth, a phone. "It wasn't there before," she whispered, her voice tight with a deeper dread that prickled beneath the surface of the relief. "We would have seen it, from miles away. A sign that bright. Why wasn't it visible until—" She looked at her camera's clock display. 12:01 a.m., until midnight. Liam paused, the cold logic of her words penetrating his hope-fueled haze. She was right. A sign that vivid should have been a beacon from miles on this flat, dark expanse. It hadn't just become visible, it felt like it had appeared. He remembered the gas station attendant. Best be clear of it for midnight. Unease coiled in his gut again, cold and heavy, but the sign blazed invitingly, a stark contrast to the terrifying emptiness they'd been enduring. The lure was too strong. Thirst, cold, and exhaustion warred against the sudden profound wrongness of the situation. Maybe it's down in a dip, Liam argued, though he didn't believe it. Maybe the power just came back on. We have to check it out, Maya. We don't have a choice. They walked towards the light, the initial surge of relief replaced by a tense, wary silence. As they drew closer, the air itself seemed to change, growing thick and heavy, carrying the faint, tinny strains of music. Nat King Cole, maybe. Unforgettable. It drifted from the direction of the sign, oddly clear yet distant. They crested the final rise and looked down. The Starlight Oasis lay nestled just off the highway, a perfect little time capsule, a classic Googie-style motel, all sharp angles and starburst motifs, stood beside a gleaming chrome and glass diner. The neon sign atop the diner buzzed, casting flickering pink and blue light across the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. Lights grew warmly within the diner's large windows. It looked eerily pristine, untouched by the decades of decay that had claimed everything else along this bypass stretch of road. The paint was fresh, the chrome gleamed, the windows were spotless. Yet the surrounding desert pushed right up against its edges, tumbleweeds piled against the back walls, the pervasive silence of the Mojave pressing in, barely held at bay by the faint music. There were no cars in the lot, no tire tracks in the dust, no signs of recent life other than the impossible lights and music. "This is wrong, Liam," she breathed, stopping at the edge of the parking lot. "This feels really wrong." He felt it too, a deep, primal wrongness that screamed louder than the buzzing neon. But the diner door, glass etched with a starburst pattern, promised warmth, coffee, maybe even a working telephone. Desperation won. "We need help, Maya. We check it out. Carefully. If anything seems off, we leave." He pushed forward, his boots crunching on the strangely undisturbed gravel. The faint music seemed to swell slightly as they approached the diner. The air hummed, not just from the neon, but from something else. A low vibration felt more in the bones than heard with the ears. He reached the door, hesitated for only a second, then gripped the cool metal handle and pulled it open, the bell above chiming with startling clarity in the heavy air. He stepped inside, desperate for help, walking straight into the heart of the neon mirage.
The interior of the Starlight Oasis Cafe was as immaculate and unsettlingly preserved as the exterior. Polished chrome gleamed on the counter stools and trim. Red vinyl booths lined the large windows, their surfaces smooth and uncannily free of dust or wear. Checkered linoleum tiles shone under the fluorescent lights. The air hung thick with the smell of old coffee, stale cigarette smoke, despite the lack of ashtrays, and something else, something vaguely metallic like ozone after a lightning strike. The Nat King Cole tune played softly from unseen speakers, seeming to loop back on itself every few bars. The diner was empty, utterly, unnervingly empty, except for one figure. Behind the long formica counter, wiping it down with a slow, methodical rhythm, stood a man. He was pale, unnervingly so, with slicked-back dark hair and eyes that seemed too dark, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. He wore a crisp white shirt, black bow tie, and a starched white apron, a uniform straight out of a 1950s photograph, perfect down to the creases, almost too perfect. He looked up as the bell chimed, his expression placid, neutral, not surprised, not welcoming, just observing. "Evening, folks," he said.
his voice soft, even, with a strange lack of inflection. "Bit late for travelers on this stretch." Liam cleared his throat, the sudden normalcy of the greeting jarring against the profound weirdness of the place. "Our car broke down, a few miles back. Dead engine, no signal. We saw your sign." The man nodded slowly, never breaking his rhythm with the cleaning cloth. "Happens. Road can be tricky out here. Folks get lost sometimes." He gestured towards the counter stools with the cloth. "Sit yourselves down. Warm up. Coffee?" Too thirsty and cold to question the offer immediately, they slid onto the cool, rotating stools. The vinyl felt strangely clammy beneath their hands. The attendant, as Liam mentally dubbed him, moved with an unnerving grace, pouring coffee from a classic glass pot into 2 thick ceramic mugs. He placed them on the counter. Steam rose, carrying that same old, slightly burnt coffee smell. Liam took a tentative sip. It was lukewarm, bordering on cold, yet the flavor hit him with an unexpected jolt, intensely familiar, evoking a half-forgotten memory of childhood road trips, diners just like this one, his father sipping coffee while studying a map. He saw Maya flinch slightly as she drank hers, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "This taste," Maya began, looking at the attendant. "It reminds me of—" "Just coffee," the attendant interrupted smoothly, his gaze vacant. "Fresh pot." But it clearly wasn't fresh. Liam looked around, trying to get his bearings, trying to push down the rising tide of wrongness. Details snagged at his attention. The large, round clock on the wall above the kitchen pass-through, its second hand wasn't sweeping smoothly. It jumped, stuttered, sometimes moving backward a click or two before jerking forward again. Condensation inexplicably beaded on the inside of the large plate glass windows despite the bone-dried desert air outside. Maya nudged him, her eyes wide, pointing subtly towards the gleaming chrome napkin dispenser on the counter. Liam followed her gaze. His reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed, but Maya's reflection seemed delayed. When she turned her head slightly, her reflection lagged for a fraction of a second before mimicking the movement. And behind their reflections, superimposed faintly, were other shapes, fleeting, shadowy figures seated in the booths, vanishing as soon as she tried to focus on them. "Do you have a phone we could use?" Liam asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Need to call a tow truck, or maybe you know the nearest town with service." The attendant stopped wiping the counter, his dark eyes fixing on Liam. "Phones," he mused, tilting his head slightly. "Tricky things out here, like the road. Sometimes they work, sometimes—" He gestured vaguely towards a vintage payphone mounted on the far wall near the restrooms. "Give that one a try if you like. Reception comes and goes." Liam slid off the stool, his legs feeling heavy. He crossed the diner, the looping Nat King Cole seeming to bore into his skull. He lifted the heavy black receiver. No dial tone, just a low, humming crackle, the same insidious static they'd heard on the Mustang's radio. He slammed it back onto the cradle, frustration mixing with a chilling dread. He turned back to the counter. Maya was watching the attendant intently. "How long has this place been here?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. "This section of 66, it's been bypassed for decades." The attendant smiled, a slow, slight curve of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. It was the most expression they'd seen from him, and it was deeply unsettling. "Long time," he said softly. "Folks come, folks go. The road provides what you need, or what it thinks you need." His answers were evasive, nonsensical platitudes that answered nothing.
He never seemed surprised by their predicament, never offered concrete help, never asked where they were from or where they were going. Liam's rational mind screamed that this was impossible, a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. But the lukewarm coffee, the static on the line, the jumping clock face, it was all too real, too tangibly wrong. Maya felt it more deeply. I could see it in the tension around her eyes, the way she kept glancing at the windows, at the reflections. She looked at the attendant, truly looked at him, and I saw a flicker of realization or terror dawn in her expression. "You haven't blinked, not once, since we got here." The attendant's faint smile remained fixed. He slowly raised the cloth and began wiping the counter again, his dark, unblinking eyes holding Maya's gaze. Liam felt a wave of nausea. The air thickened further, the low hum intensifying subtly, vibrating up through the soles of his shoes. This wasn't a quirky roadside stop. This wasn't salvation. This was something else entirely. Something ancient, patient, and hungry, wearing the mask of nostalgia. They hadn't found refuge. They'd stumbled into the flytrap.
"You folks look worn out," the attendant said, his voice smooth as worn chrome, breaking the tense silence. He gestured toward the doorway behind the counter, presumably leading towards the motel section. "Got a room vacant, number 3, on the house. Road looks different in the daylight. Rest up." Liam's mind screamed, "No, run!" But where? Back into the freezing, predatory darkness? Back towards the dead car miles away? Exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing them down. The promise of a bed, a locked door, even in this profoundly unsettling place, was a powerful lure. Maybe, just maybe, things would make sense in the morning light. Maybe this was all a bizarre, stress-induced fugue state. "Okay," Liam heard himself say, the word feeling alien in his mouth. "Thank you. A room would be helpful." The attendant simply nodded, retrieving a key on a simple brass tag marked 3 from a hookboard beneath the counter. He didn't ask them to sign in, didn't request any information. He handed the key to Liam. End of the walkway, lights on. They practically fled the diner, the bell chiming mockingly behind them. Outside, the neon still buzzed, casting flickering, distorted shadows. The motel wing was a low-slung building connected to the diner by a covered walkway. The door to room 3 stood slightly ajar, a sliver of yellow light spilling onto the concrete path. Liam pushed it open cautiously. The room was a mirror of the diner's uncanny preservation. Twin beds with crisp, floral-patterned bedspreads, a heavy, dark wood dresser, a Gideon Bible on the nightstand, a faint scent of stale air freshener and dust overlaying that same faint ozone smell. It was clean, impossibly clean, yet felt profoundly empty, like a stage set waiting for actors who never arrived. Liam locked the door behind them, the deadbolt sliding home with a heavy, definitive clunk. It offered little comfort. Liam collapsed onto one of the beds, the springs groaning beneath his weight. Exhaustion washed over him, a leaden tide. He wanted to sleep, to escape into oblivion, hoping dawn would reset this nightmare. But Maya couldn't rest. Her artist's eye, her sensitivity to atmosphere was on high alert. While Liam drifted in a state of near collapse, eyes closed but mind racing, Maya began to explore the small room, driven by a desperate need to understand, to find proof that they weren't going insane. She ran her hand along the dusty windowsill, peered into the empty closet. Then, adjusting the lumpy pillow on her bed, her fingers brushed against something stiff tucked beneath the mattress edge. She pulled it out, a faded Polaroid photograph.
It showed a smiling family, mom, dad, 2 kids, squinting in the sun, standing beside a station wagon that looked straight out of the 1970s. The car had a flat tire. Behind them, barely visible but unmistakably the same cracked stretch of Route 66, was the desolate landscape where their own Mustang now sat dead. A cold dread snaked up her spine. Her search became more frantic. She pulled open the drawers of the heavy dresser. Empty, empty. Then in the back of the bottom drawer, wedged into a corner, she found an old postcard. The front depicted a cheerful, sun-drenched image of the Grand Canyon. The back had a message scrawled in frantic, looping handwriting, addressed to someone named Sarah. Dearest Sarah, car trouble near Amboy. Found this place, Starlight Oasis. Seems okay, but something's wrong. The music, it doesn't stop. Feel like we've been here before. The man behind the counter, he just smiles. I think it's not real. Can't seem to leave. The message ended there, the ink trailing off into a desperate smudge. Her heart pounded. She knelt, peering under the bed furthest from the door. Her fingers brushed against something soft. She pulled it out. A child's teddy bear, worn, one button eye missing, smelling faintly of dust, ozone, and something else. Decay. She dropped it as if burned. Driven by a terrible certainty, she went back to the nightstand between the beds. She opened the Gideon Bible. Tucked inside, used as a bookmark, was not scripture, but a page torn from a motel guest register. The paper was brittle with age. Entries spanning decades, 1958, 1967, 1974, 1982, 1995, 2003. Different names, different hometowns, all checked in to room 3. Some entries were neat, hopeful notes about fixing a car or waiting for sunrise. Others grew increasingly agitated down the page, the handwriting becoming shaky, terrified. The last few entries were barely legible scratches, ending abruptly mid-word or trailing off the page. It watches. The static. Here's thoughts. Can't wake up. Maya stood trembling in the center of the room, the postcard, the photo, the register page clutched in her hand. Echoes. Ghosts trapped in a loop. This place wasn't just abandoned. It was a repository of despair. And as the realization fully hit her, the room flickered. Like a faulty projector bulb, the lights blinked violently. For a terrifying instant, the solid walls seemed to become transparent, showing not the motel walkway outside, but the stark, empty moonlit desert stretching to infinity. Then, just as quickly, the walls solidified, but now they flashed with superimposed images, the horrifying split-second glimpse of a twisted car wreck engulfed in flames, a woman's face pale and screaming silently, shadowy figures running in blind panic through the desolate landscape outside. The air crackled. A low, pervasive hum started, vibrating up through the floorboards, through the mattress, into their very bones. It wasn't just sound. It felt like the building blocks of reality itself were shuddering. "Liam!" Maya screamed, dropping the papers, stumbling back against the bed where he lay. Liam bolted upright, instantly awake, adrenaline flooding his system. His eyes snapped open just in time to see a silhouette, tall, indistinct, but unmistakably the shape of the attendant, standing inside the locked room, near the door. It was there for a heartbeat, a flicker of deeper darkness against the flickering room, and then, just as quickly, it dissolved, vanishing completely. The hum intensified, evolving into the familiar, oppressive sound of static, loud, invasive, filling the room, pressing in on their eardrums. "Did you see that?" Liam gasped, scrambling off the bed, grabbing Maya's arm. "It's the place, Liam," Maya cried, tears streaming down her face, holding up the items she had found. "It's a trap.
It collects people. We're not the first." The Gideon Bible fell open on the floor, its pages ruffling in a non-existent breeze. The pristine room suddenly felt ancient, predatory. The Starlight Oasis wasn't a haven, it was a lure, meticulously crafted from nostalgia and neon, designed to draw in the lost and the desperate. And the static, the omnipresent hum, wasn't just interference. It was the entity itself, the presence they'd felt in the darkness, now manifesting, tightening its grip. They weren't just guests. They were the next entry in a decades-long register of despair.
Panic gave way to a chilling, desperate clarity. Huddled together in the flickering room, the oppressive static a constant pressure against their eardrums, they pieced together the fragmented horrors, their disjointed observations crystallizing into a terrifying theory. "The sign," Maya whispered, her voice hoarse. "It only appeared at midnight. The gas station guy warned us." "And the attendant," Liam added, his mind racing, shedded last vestiges of skepticism like a snake sheds skin. "He's not real. He's a construct, a lure, like a pitcher plant uses nectar." They theorized, voices low and urgent against the thrumming static. The Starlight Oasis wasn't a permanent structure existing in normal time and space. It was a localized phenomenon, a temporal and perceptual anomaly tied to this specific, forgotten stretch of Route 66. It manifested fully around midnight, perhaps drawing power from the accumulated psychic residue of the Mother Road itself. The hopes, dreams, desperations, and tragedies of countless travelers who had passed this way over the decades. Their strong emotions, particularly regret and despair, acted like fuel. "The static," Maya breathed, naming the presence they both felt, the hum that vibrated through the floor, the crackle that haunted the airwaves. "It's not in the oasis, it is the oasis, or it creates it. It draws people in, feeds on their emotions, traps them. Like the family in the Polaroid, the frantic postcard writer, the terrified scribbles in the register. They weren't just memories, they were echoes, trapped in a loop, replaying their final moments of hope turning to terror, perhaps fueling the mirage for the next victims." No sooner had they voiced this understanding than the nature of the assault shifted. The generalized menace focused, becoming intensely personal. The static, sensing their awareness, perhaps even feeding on their dawning comprehension and terror, began to probe their minds, weaponizing their own histories against them. For Liam, the pragmatic analyst, haunted by a past project failure that cost his previous company dearly, the flickering walls suddenly displayed distorted projections of angry executives' faces, their mouths moving, though the only sound was the overwhelming static, now laced with phantom whispers accusing him of incompetence, of letting everyone down. He saw the phantom image of an ex-girlfriend, her face etched with disappointment, superimposed over the motel room door. "Always running, Liam, never facing things." The accusation struck deep, tapping into his buried insecurities. Maya, the artist plagued with self-doubt and unresolved family issues, saw the room morph subtly. The cheap motel art on the wall twisted into grotesque parodies of her own unfinished canvases. Shadows in the corners coalesced into disapproving figures resembling her critical relatives, their silent judgment radiating coldness. Whispers, seemingly coming from the buzzing lamps, mocked her artistic ambitions, told her she was wasting her life chasing nostalgic ghosts. "Never good enough, Maya, just like your mother said." The illusions were insidious, designed not just to frighten, but to dismantle their resolve, to plunge them into the despair the entity seemed to crave. The physical structure of the oasis reacted violently to their resistance. The building groaned around them, a sound like stressed metal and splintering wood.
The lights flickered with manic intensity, plunging the room into momentary, heart-stopping darkness before flaring back on, each flash burning afterimages onto their retinas. The Nat King Cole tune drifting from the diner warped, the melody becoming discordant, stretched and menacing, underscored by harsh static bursts. Phantom footsteps echoed heavily on the concrete walkway just outside their locked door. Heavy, deliberate treads pacing back and forth, then scratching. Fingernails, or something like them, scraping slowly across the wood of the door. Whispers slithered under the doorframe, insidious and personal, calling their names. Liam, so tired, just give in. Maya, stay, it's safer here. They knew, with absolute certainty, that staying meant becoming another echo, another faded entry in the register, another ghost feeding the illusion. The midnight window, the period of the oasis's strongest manifestation, felt like it was closing in, not fading, but solidifying, preparing to make their entrapment permanent. Morning light, the rational solution they had clung to, now seemed like a false promise offered by the attendant. Daylight might never come in this place. "We have to get out," Liam said, his voice grim, pulling Maya towards the door. "Now! Back to the road. Back to whatever's real." "How?" Maya cried, glancing fearfully at the scratching door. "It knows what we're afraid of. It's everywhere." "We fight it," Liam said, gripping the doorknob, the cold brass feeling strangely solid amidst the flickering chaos. "We don't believe it. We get back to the car. We get out of this dead zone." They had to escape the starlight oasis before it fully digested them, before they became just another layer of static on the line. They had to run, now, before midnight bloomed completely and trapped them forever in its dusty, neon-lit heart.
Liam wrenched the deadbolt back, the clack swallowed by the oppressive static hum. He threw the door open and pulled Maya out onto the covered walkway. The scene outside had subtly, nauseatingly shifted. The layout of the motel wing seemed slightly different, longer perhaps, the corners sharper, less defined. The path back towards the parking lot and the invisible highway beyond was obscured by shifting, semi-transparent barriers. Walls of shimmering heat haze distorted the view, making the buzzing neon sign of the diners seem miles away one second, terrifyingly close the next. Pockets of impenetrable darkness pulsed like sores on the landscape. Standing by the diner door, silhouetted against the garish pink and blue light spilling from within, was the attendant. But he wasn't the placid, pale man anymore. His form flickered violently, like bad television reception. His limbs seemed momentarily too long, his head too large. And the faint, unsettling smile had stretched into a horrifying, predatory grin that split his face, revealing glimpses of something dark and empty behind the facade. He didn't move, simply watched them, the silent sentinel of their prison. "Run!" Liam yelled, grabbing Maya's hand, pulling her forward. They plunged into the distorted landscape, making a desperate break for the highway they could no longer clearly see. The static threw everything it had at them. Phantom headlights roared out of the darkness, attached to spectral cars, vintage sedans, hulking trucks swerving directly towards them, forcing them to dive onto the cracking concrete, only to vanish inches away, their ghostly engine sounds fading into the omnipresent hum. Ghostly hitchhikers flickered into existence at the edge of their vision. Translucent figures in dated clothes, thumbs outstretched, faces gaunt with despair, dissolving into dust motes when they got too close. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift and crack, threatening to swallow them whole. The air filled with a deafening cacophony. The roar of static, the distorted, menacing music, and layered beneath it the faint, echoing screams of countless past victims, a chorus of trapped despair. Navigating was impossible by sight alone.
The flickering neon, the shimmering illusions, the pulsing darkness, it was a sensory assault designed to disorient and break them. They stumbled, fell, scrambled back up, driven by pure primal terror. Maya, gasping for breath, fumbled with her camera. Remembering the corrupted images, the way the flash seemed to cut through something. She raised it, pointing it ahead, and pressed the button. Flash! For a blinding fraction of a second, the intense burst of light seemed to disrupt the illusion. The pristine motel facade wavered, revealing crumbling ancient foundations beneath. The shimmering heat haze dissipated momentarily, showing the true desolate desert landscape just yards away. The attendant's form flickered wildly, momentarily resolving into something skeletal and insect-like, before snapping back into his grinning mask. She started firing it off sporadically as they ran, each burst offering a split-second glimpse of reality, a fleeting guide through the nightmare. But the battery was low, the flashes becoming weaker, less frequent. They were nearing the edge of the parking lot, the boundary where the pristine illusion met the real, decayed asphalt of Route 66. The main neon sign, the Starlight Oasis, buzzed directly overhead, seeming to pulse with malevolent energy. It felt like the final barrier. Liam felt Maya faltering, her steps slowing, her eyes wide with the terror reflected in the flashing illusions. He saw the despair trying to take root, the insidious whispers of the static finding purchase. Give up. So tired. No, Liam shouted, not just at the illusions, but at the encroaching despair. He tightened his grip on Maya's hand, forcing her to look at him. It feeds on this, on fear, on belief. An idea sparked, born of desperation. We have to reject it. Focus on what's real. Focus on us. He remembered why Maya wanted this trip. Not just the kitsch, but the connection. Something they'd lost. He focused on that memory, on the feel of her hand in his, small and cold but undeniably real. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the mundane, solid shape of his keychain, a cheap metal souvenir from a tech conference, utterly out of place here. He anchored his mind to it, to the memory of complaining about the bad coffee at that conference, to the feel of the cold metal. Real. Focus, Maya, he urged, pulling her forward. Think about home. Think about getting out. Don't look at it. Look at me. Feel my hand. It's real. She squeezed his hand back, tears streaming down her face, but her gaze locked with his. They put their heads down, focusing only on each other, on the shared goal, on the gritty reality of the cracked pavement beneath their feet, revealed in the dying camera flashes. They pushed forward under the buzzing, flickering neon sign, past the invisible threshold where the heavy, charged air of the oasis abruptly ceased. They stumbled, momentum carrying them forward, and collapsed onto the cold, solid, undeniably real asphalt of the bypassed Route 66. They gasped for air, chests heaving, hearts pounding like trip hammers. Behind them, the cacophony abruptly cut off, replaced by the profound, ringing silence of the Mojave Desert. Slowly, cautiously, Liam helped Maya sit up. They looked back towards the rise where the Starlight Oasis had blazed only moments before. There was nothing there. Just the faint, crumbling outlines of old foundations, barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom, looking like they hadn't been disturbed in 50 years. The neon mirage had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The first pale hint of dawn was touching the eastern horizon, painting the sky a fragile gray. They were alone again, on the empty road. But this time, the silence felt blessedly, terrifyingly real.
The transition was jarring. One moment, they were engulfed in a hurricane of sensory overload and predatory illusion. The next, absolute silence and the vast, indifferent emptiness of the desert night reclaiming its dominion. The air, thin and cold, felt clean, stripped of the heavy, charged quality of the oasis. Shaking uncontrollably, partly from cold, partly from residual terror and adrenaline crash, they huddled together on the cracked pavement, the first gray light of dawn slowly illuminating the desolate landscape. Looking back at the rise, where the Starlight Oasis had stood, Liam could barely make out the skeletal foundations. No pristine diner, no glowing motel wing, just rubble barely distinguishable from the surrounding scrub and rock. It was as if the entire encounter had been a shared hallucination, a mass psychotic break brought on by dehydration and fear. But they knew better. The terror felt too real, the details too sharp, the shared experience too congruent. Wordlessly, they helped each other up, limbs heavy, bodies bruised from falls, minds reeling. They started the long, slow walk back towards where they'd left the Mustang, miles down the empty highway. The silence of the real desert, which had felt so oppressive hours before, now seemed almost comforting. A stark contrast to the insidious whispers and static hum of the phantom oasis. They didn't speak much. What was there to say? How could they articulate the nightmare they had barely survived? As the sun finally breached the horizon, painting the desert in stark relief, Liam felt something heavy in his jacket pocket. He reached in, confused. His fingers closed around cold brass. He pulled it out. It was the key to room 3, the simple tag dangling from it. He hadn't consciously taken it back from the nightstand. He stared at it, then showed it to Maya. Her eyes widened, a fresh wave of fear washing over her face, a tangible, impossible souvenir from a place that didn't exist. Maya, in turn, looked down at her arm, pulling up her sleeve slightly. A faint red mark, almost like a static burn, patterned the skin where she'd brushed against something. A wall, a door frame, inside the flickering motel room. Maya raised her camera, her hands trembling slightly. She scrolled through the photos she'd taken during their escape and those she'd snapped inside the oasis before the main manifestation. The images from the walk before midnight were just dark, blurry shots of the road. The ones taken inside the diner and motel room and during their frantic escape were almost entirely corrupted. Blank white screens, screens filled with roiling digital static like angry television snow, and a few fleeting, terrifying glimpses, a distorted image of the attendant's grinning face, stretched unnaturally. A flashlit view of the motel room showing peeling wallpaper and decay instead of pristine surfaces, and a final shot towards the oasis as they collapsed on the road, showing only empty desert under the neonless dawn sky. Proof, of a sort, but proof of madness as much as of a miracle or a monster. Hours later, dehydrated, exhausted, and shell-shocked, huddled near the inexplicably dead Mustang under the full glare of the morning sun, they heard it, the rumble of an engine, a real one this time. An 18-wheeler, heat shimmering off its massive grille, slowed and pulled over onto the shoulder beside them. The driver, a burly man with a kind, weathered face, leaned out. "You folks all right? Breakdown?" Liam and Maya exchanged a look. How could they possibly explain? Our car died, we walked to a haunted neon mirage that feeds on despair and only appears at midnight, fought our way out past its grinning avatar, and oh, by the way, here's the key to a room that doesn't exist. "Yeah," Liam managed, his voice raspy. "Engine just died last night, no signal." The trucker nodded sympathetically. "Damn dead zone. Happens. Looky, I took the old highway today, saved me some time on the interstate way station." He offered them water, called for a tow truck on his CB radio, his voice calm and ordinary in the mundane sunlight. They were rescued, towed back to a dusty, unremarkable town where the Mustang was declared inexplicably fried, its entire electrical system dead. They bought bus tickets, wanting only to get away, back to the noise and anonymity of the city. Their relationship was irrevocably altered. The underlying tension was gone, replaced by the fragile, unspoken bond of shared trauma. They had survived something unbelievable, something that existed in the space between reality and nightmare, fueled by the forgotten ghosts of the Mother Road. Months later, back in their apartment, the city lights a comforting, predictable glow outside their window. A sudden burst of static from the kitchen radio made them both freeze, eyes locking across the room. A shared flicker of primal fear. Liam unconsciously touched the old motel key he kept hidden in his desk drawer. Maya rubbed the faint mark on her arm. What really happened on Route 66 at midnight? It was their secret.
an unbelievable burden carried in the silence between them. They had escaped the starlight oasis, but the question lingered, cold and persistent as the desert night. Had they escaped completely? Or had a tiny fragment of the static, a whisper of that predatory illusion, hitched a ride home? Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.